We are back to school this month, and here to educate us is celebrity historian Rafi Andonian about how we developed so much hype around school. Hey, Rafi, great to see you.
Hey there.
Yeah.
All right,
Back
so
to school.
Back to school.
was back to school always such a big deal?
No,
I
it's
feel
a-
like it's such a big
Yeah,
hype
huge,
now.
huge
It is,
deal.
you
Yeah.
would think that, but it's not. So believe it or not, you know, a little more than 100 years ago, only 14% of Americans graduated high school by age 25. We're talking about an early part of the 20th century. Even in 1970, about 50 years ago, 50 plus years ago, you only had about 55% of Americans that graduated high school. So only about a half. It's not until recently, in the last several years, that we've hit 90% of Americans graduating high school. So you have more people in school, makes back to school a bigger deal when you think about it. Now, the reason for that is, think about the colonial period. In the colonial era, you don't have these free public schools for all students to attend. Education was kind of haphazard. You might have a tutor at home. You might have a schoolmaster that comes through town. You might go to a private school or through a church or something like that. Or how about apprenticing? You may not do an education the way we think of it, but maybe you go apprentice usually for 7 years under a trade of some sort to be able to kind of, you know, almost like an extended internship is how we might think about it. So you're learning that practice, right, in practice, whether it's a blacksmith or a shoemaker or something like that. So those are kind of what you're seeing, you know, in the colonial period. What changes this to start us on the path toward what, you know, we see as back to school is in the American Revolution. You see, the founding fathers thought very highly of education because they thought for a republic to survive, you have to have a good civic education and what they considered, what they would label virtue. And they thought this is how you would learn it through education. So they did certain things to support public education. You don't have the, you know, vast local schools the way that we think about it. But for example, federal government started to issue land grants, and that practice continued for a long time, well over a century after that, including establishing University of Arkansas later, past the era of founding fathers, but through that practice of land grants. So these are the kinds of things that happen. Now, funny enough, I brought with me, speaking of the founding fathers, a pen that is the pen from, made of a tree from George Washington's Mount Vernon property from the 1780s. I know people there, when that tree came down, I got this pen made out of it. So I thought founding fathers education, this is fitting.
No way, you didn't get that from the gift shop?
Oh, that the gift shop? Well, I know people there, let's just say, it can be a gift shop item.
Okay.
So that connects to education
cool.
and the founding fathers the way that I think about it. Yeah. Here in Arkansas, it wasn't until the 1920s, about a century ago, that you have a couple of governors, Gray and Governor Parnell, who are going to do a lot of reform, for example, stabilizing funding. To give you an example, compared to states that spend about 1/10 what Oklahoma spent per pupil and 1/20 what Missouri spent per pupil. So these governors said, try to stabilize a funding source for public schools, and in addition to that, try to move away from one-room schoolhouses that were all over the state, because those are more challenging to learn when you're cross grades in the same room. It worked well, actually. In the 1920s, the rate of people enrolled in public schools in Arkansas more than doubled because of the work of these governors. So I would attribute a big growth spurt in the 1920s because of the governor's works that we're talking about in Arkansas. And of course, University of Arkansas right here in Fayetteville in the higher ed side, doing a lot of things as well. Those two things together in Arkansas are what, you know, bring it together here.
Yeah, like why do you think reading and writing became so important?
Think of it this way, there's a couple of things that are going on bigger picture, right? In the Republic, we have, you know, well, you know, the importance to the Republic. And by the way, real quick, a guy, Horace Mann in Massachusetts in the early 19th century established the public school system as we know it, which focused on reading, writing, and arithmetic. They call it the 3 R's. And that was the first time that we had universal public education for local, you know, communities. And that's a model we've copied across the nation from Massachusetts. But bigger picture than that, I would go back to the printing press. Think about the printing press that comes out in the 15th century. That makes reading scalable, because in the past you have reading books being handwritten.
Right.
Now you have this print that you can set the type once and then just, you know, powder it.
And everybody's looking at the same
and
thing.
everyone's looking at the same thing, and you can publish 100, 200, 500 books quickly as opposed to handwriting. Well, now that you have it scalable and tiny print, by the way, which is a challenge to read, it makes it so the demand for literacy becomes greater. The access is greater, so the demand for literacy becomes greater. So I would start there, and then you look at the Protestant Reformation, which is shortly after that. And the Protestant Reformation, it emphasizes reading the Bible directly for yourself for a direct connection to God. That brings the importance of education. And then a couple of hundred years later, in the United States, you have the Republic that we talk about. So here in the United States, we're building on those traditions when we come up with the republic concept, which is why women got education early in the early republic, because it's supposed to be their mothers of the republic who are guardians of the republic to raise good citizens. And as a result, you begin to have women's education in the early republic. But they're building on the printing press and the Protestant Reformation and the Enlightenment, the era that they're in the early republic, to carry this tradition forward.
Cool, Rafi, thank you so much for joining us. Talk about
Thank
the
you.
history of
Yes.
education in our country.
And thanks
All
for
right.
bringing us these cool rulers
I
to
know,
look
look
at.
at
It's
that
got all my
thing.
U.S. presidents on there, so I
Yeah.
don't forget them.